The ultrasound picture my sister cried over at Thanksgiving had been printed on a home inkjet printer. And I didn't notice until 11 months later, standing in a copy shop on Chendon Boulevard, holding two printouts side by side under fluorescent light, watching the paper stock give her away. My name is Josephine Kowalski. Everyone but my mother calls me Jo. I'm 33 years old. I audit fraudulent medical claims for a regional insurer here in Boise. And for a long time I would have told you the worst thing that ever happened to my family was losing my father. I would have been wrong. The worst thing was what my sister did after. Brianna is 2 years younger than me, and if you'd asked me at any point before last spring, I would have said we were close in the specific, complicated way sisters raised in a small house with one bathroom are close. We shared a room until I was 11. We built a blanket fort empire in that room that lasted, off and on, for 3 straight summers. She was the one who drove me to the ER at 19, when I split my chin, open falling off a borrowed bike on the Greenbelt. And I was the one who sat with her in a Planned Parenthood waiting room at 22 and never told a soul. We had that kind of history. The kind that isn't clean, isn't a highlight reel, but is real in a way that's hard to fake. Which is, I think, part of why it took me so long to believe she was capable of faking the thing that finally broke us. Our father, Walter Kowalski, built duplexes for a living, not metaphorically, literally with his hands, for the first 15 years, and then with a small crew after that. By the time I was in high school, he owned 14 units, scattered through the North End and Cullister, modest rentals with covered porches and chain-link yards, the kind of unglamorous real estate that quietly turns into serious money if you hold it long enough and don't do anything stupid. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer the winter I turned 27. He was dead 5 months later, which is fast even for that disease. And I've never fully forgiven the universe for how little warning he got. In the last of those 5 months, sitting up in a rented hospital bed in the front room of the house on Alturas Street, because he refused to die anywhere but home, my father built one more thing, a trust. He did it with Preston Larkin, a Boise State attorney he'd known since they were both 22 and broke, and he did it, I think, because he knew Brianna and I were not going to be simple about money, and he wanted to leave us rules instead of just leaving us alone with each other. The rules were these. The Kowalski family trust held the 14 rental units, the cabin on Payette Lake near McCall that had been in his family since before I was born, and about $400,000 in accounts. The corpus. That's the word Preston always used. The corpus was to be split evenly between Brianna and me, but neither of us could touch our full share until we turned 35. Dad's reasoning, according to Preston, was that 35 was when he himself had finally stopped being an idiot with money, and he wanted us to have the same runway. But he built in 2 other clauses, because my father was a man who believed hard in incentives and could not resist tinkering. The first was the legacy distribution. Whichever of us had a biological child first would receive an immediate payment of $150,000 from the shared corpus. Released early, no waiting for 35 meant, his exact words, typed into the document, to help raise the next Kowalski in comfort. The second was the hardship distribution. If either of us suffered a qualifying medical hardship, defined narrowly to include a pregnancy loss requiring a hospital procedure or documented medical intervention, the trustee could authorize an equivalent early payment for medical and emotional recovery costs. Both clauses drew from the same shared pool. Every dollar released early to one sister was a dollar that wouldn't be sitting in the corpus, compounding, waiting for both of us at 35. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Hold on to it. I want to be fair to my father here, because it would be easy, in hindsight, to make him sound careless. He wasn't. He built the hardship clause because Brianna had already had one loss by then, a bad one, at 24, and he'd watched her drain a savings account paying for it out of pocket, because her insurance at the time was garbage. He built it out of love. He just didn't build it imagining that anyone would lie to get it. I think about the week of Dad's funeral more than I let on to anyone, Because it's the week I remember Brianna being most purely herself, before money or Dean, or any of what came later got tangled up in it. She was the one who picked out his tie. A plain navy one he'd worn to every one of our school graduations, because she said he'd want to look he was headed somewhere ordinary rather than somewhere final. She was the one who stood up at the service, without notes, and told the story of him trying to teach both of us to frame a wall, when we were kids. How he'd let us hammer nails in crooked, because he said a house built by people who loved it was allowed to be a little crooked. I stood in the back of that church watching her hold a room full of grieving strangers, steady with nothing but her voice. And I remember thinking, not for the first time, that my sister was better with people than I would ever be. That whatever she lacked in follow through she made up for in the specific gift of making other people feel less alone. It's part of why what came later cut so deep. She hadn't just lied to me. She'd used the exact gift I loved most in her to do it. Brianna married Dean Marsh 3 years after Dad died. Dean is a good-looking, restless man who has, in the 8 years I've known him, sold commercial insurance, flipped 2 houses badly, and most recently sunk a chunk of Brianna's savings into a struggling brewery in Garden City that makes a serviceable IPA and not much money. They live in a rental off 27th Street in the North End, blocks from where we grew up. And Brianna works part-time at a boutique on 13th that I don't think has turned a profit since before the pandemic. I say this not to be cruel, but because it's relevant. By last spring, my sister and her husband were, by any honest accounting, in financial trouble. And they both knew that the hardship distribution clause existed. Because Preston had read us the whole trust document aloud at Dad's kitchen table the week after the funeral, and Brianna had asked more questions about that clause than any other. She and Dean had been doing IVF for almost 2 years. I knew this the way you know things about a sister you love, but don't fully confide in anymore. Secondhand, in fragments, from our mother, who couldn't always tell what was supposed to be private. I knew there had been 2 failed transfers. I knew a third had, in February, produced a positive test, and that Brianna had told our mother before she told me, which stung more than I let on. I knew that 8 weeks later, in April, she called a family dinner at Mom's house on Alchurch Street to tell everyone she'd lost the pregnancy. She cried at that dinner in a way I had genuinely never seen her cry, not even at Dad's funeral. And she held up a folded ultrasound printout, like it was something sacred. And my mother wrapped both arms around her, and I felt something in my chest cave in with grief for my sister. Real grief, no suspicion in it at all. I hugged her. I told her I was so sorry. I meant it completely. It was Preston Larkin who first said the word, documentation, to me 3 weeks after that dinner. In a phone call I almost didn't take, because I was in the middle of a claims audit at work, and thought it was Mom calling about something else. Brianna's filed a hardship petition, he told me. I have to notify you as co-beneficiary, since any distribution affects your eventual share. I just need a records release from her, and this should be a formality. I told him, of course, take whatever she needs to take, and I didn't think about it again for a week. Then I thought about it a little more than that, in the specific, guilty way you think about a request for money from someone you love, when you're the one who was raised to distrust every request for money on principle. Because our father used to say that about tenants who were late on rent. The story's never the problem. It's whether the story matches the paperwork. And I had spent the better part of a decade making a living off that exact sentence. The paperwork, when Preston finally sent me the summary he was required to share, was thin. A letter on letterhead from a clinic called Futhiel's Women's Health, signed by a doctor, Ann Whitmore, describing a pregnancy loss at 11 weeks requiring a dilation and curettage procedure. A single ultrasound image, undated in the corner where date stamps usually print, showing a gestational sac. An itemized bill for $4,200, marked paid. No insurance listed. That last line was the first thing that snagged in my head like a hangnail. Because I know insurance paperwork the way other people know their own handwriting. Brianna and Dean were on our late father's family health plan, a sawtooth mutual policy the trust itself paid the premiums on until each of us turned 30, 5. Another one of Dad's provisions, meant to keep us both covered while we got on our feet. If Brianna had a D&C at a boys' clinic, there should have been a claim. There should have been an explanation of benefits sitting in a file somewhere, because Sawtooth Mutual is, among other things, the company I work for, and I process exactly this kind of claim 40 times a week. I didn't act on it. I want to be honest about that, because it would be flattering to say I went straight into detective mode out of some noble instinct. But the truth is I sat with that itch for almost 2 weeks doing nothing because some other part of me, the sister part, not the auditor part, did not want to find what I was afraid I'd find. I kept thinking about her at that dinner table. I kept thinking people grieve differently. Maybe she paid cash because she didn't want it on a shared record Dean might see the total on. Maybe there's an explanation. What finally moved me was the locket. Brianna started wearing a small oval silver locket that June, and she told our mother, in front of me, that she'd had the ultrasound photo shrunk down and put inside it, so I'd always have her with me. She'd decided, somewhere along the way, that the pregnancy had been a girl, though nothing in the medical letter said that. At a birthday dinner for our mother in July, Brianna let the locket fall open while she was digging in her purse, and I caught a half-second look at the photo inside before she snapped it shut, almost startled, like she hadn't meant to show anyone. It didn't match the printout Preston had shown me. Not the gestational sac shape. I'm no radiologist. I couldn't have told you if that was wrong. But the timestamp printed along the bottom edge, the one that had been cropped off the copy Preston received. The date on the locket photo was 3 weeks earlier than the date on the trust paperwork. I told myself it could be a scanning error. I told myself a lot of things. But I am, professionally, a person who has been trained for 9 years to notice that when two versions of the same document disagree on a date, the honest explanation is rare and the dishonest one is common, and I couldn't put that training down just because the claimant was my sister. I decided, sitting in my car outside my mother's house that night, that I would not say one word to Brianna until I knew. I'd seen what happens when you confront someone too early with a half-formed suspicion. They don't confess, they clean up. I needed the whole thing airtight before I said a syllable, to her or to anyone in the family, because I understood exactly what I was risking. If I was wrong, I would have accused my grieving sister of faking the worst thing that had happened to her. And there would be no coming back from that, ever. So I decided to work it the way I work every claim that smells wrong at Sawtooth Mutual quietly, on paper, one confirmed fact at a time. The first call I made, from my own kitchen on a Tuesday night with a legal pad in front of me, was to the billing office at Foothill Women's Health. I didn't lie. Not technically. I told them I was calling to coordinate a family insurance claim and needed to confirm a date of service for a patient on our shared policy, which was true, since I was still a listed dependent, adjacent contact on the trust's Sawtooth account. The woman on the phone put me on hold for 4 minutes and came back sounding faintly confused. They had no patient named Brianna Marsh in their system at all, current or historical. Not a mismatch, not a scheduling gap, nothing. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell Preston yet either, because a single, we have no record, from an overworked billing clerk, isn't proof of anything on its own. Records get filed under maiden names, under Dean's insurance instead, under a dozen boring explanations. So I called Sawtooth Mutual's own claims database the next morning, using my employee access, which I was, strictly speaking, allowed to use to verify claims tied to family policies I administered, and searched for any claim at all filed under Brianna's member ID in the prior 6 months. There was exactly one claim. It was for a wellness visit in January, nothing in April. Nothing for a D&C, nothing for Foothill Women's Health, nothing for $4,200. If she'd genuinely paid cash to keep it off Dean's radar, fine. Plenty of women do that. But the hardship petition Preston had received specifically cited that bill as proof of the medical intervention. If there was no claim and no clinic record, the only documentation behind a 6-figure trust distribution was a letter and an undated photo. I called Preston on a Thursday and asked him, carefully, Not to say anything to Brianna yet, but to hold the petition pending. One more piece of routine verification, which was true, and also the vaguest sentence I have ever constructed. Then I called a private investigator a coworker had used during a messy custody dispute, a woman named Nora Kessler, who worked out of a small office on State Street, and I paid her, out of my own account, $400 to do one specific thing: check whether a Dr. Ann Whitmore held an active medical license in the state of Idaho. Nora called me back in 3 days. There was no Dr. Ann Whitmore license to practice medicine in Idaho, active or lapsed, ever, in the entire history of the state board's searchable records. The name didn't exist. Whoever had typed that letterhead had invented a doctor. I sat with that fact for a long time, alone, at my kitchen table. And I remember feeling less like I'd caught my sister, and more like the floor of my whole childhood had quietly been replaced with something hollow, something that had only ever looked like wood. I still didn't confront her. I know that's hard to understand from the outside. People ask me now why I didn't just call her the moment Nora told me about the fake doctor. And the honest answer is that I still had a small, stubborn hope that there was a version of this where Brianna was a victim too, where some predatory clinic had scammed a grieving woman out of forged paperwork and money both. I needed to know whether she'd known. That's where Aunt Ruth came in. Ruth is my father's younger sister, 71, sharp as a tack, and the only person besides Preston who I eventually told everything to. Because Ruth had been house sitting and watching Brianna and Dean's aging Boston Terrier for a week in early August while they were jetting away for a bit. And Ruth still at the baby monitor app on phone from years earlier when she'd watched their old apartment. A leftover connects you to a smart camera where Verdance used to keep an eye on the dog and never fully deactivate it. Ruth wasn't spying. She'd simply left the app open in the background, and it pinged with motion detection one evening while she sat in her own living room across town, and out of habit she glanced at it. She heard, she told me, maybe 90 seconds of a conversation between Brianna and Dean in their kitchen, argument, toned, before she realized what she was hearing and, to her enormous credit, hit record on her phone, pointed at the monitor app's audio, before she made herself stop watching. What was on it was Dean's voice saying they couldn't keep doing the actual thing. A third time, it wasn't sustainable. And Brianna's voice, tight and furious, saying, "It doesn't have to be real, Dean, it just has to be documented. That's literally the only bar. Preston doesn't investigate. Jo's not going to investigate her own sister's miscarriage. Nobody investigates that. It's the fastest money we're ever going to see, and we need it before September." Ruth brought me her phone 2 days later and sat with me while I listened to it 4 times in her car in my mother's driveway, both of us crying for different reasons. I spent the next month building the file the way I would build a fraud referral at work, because that is genuinely the only framework I had for holding something this size without shattering. I got a notarized statement from Futhiel's Women's Health confirming no record. I got Nora's written report on the license search. I got the Sawtooth Mutual claims printout, redacted properly, showing no matching claim. I got a forensic document examiner Nora recommended to compare the letterhead font kerning against Futhiel's actual letterhead, pulled from their public website, and he found 7 inconsistencies a jury would understand in under a minute. And I had Ruth's recording, which I had a lawyer friend confirm was legal to keep in use in Idaho, since Idaho is a one-party consent state and Ruth, arguably, was a party present in that home with the app's continued permission on the account. The hardest phone call I made in that whole month wasn't to any of them. It was to Preston, telling him I was ready, and asking him to call a formal trust meeting, all beneficiaries and the trustee present, no exceptions, at his office on Bannock Street. Brianna thought the meeting was about her petition being approved. I know that because Dean told my mother so in the parking garage beforehand, cheerful, already talking about a down payment on a bigger place. My mother sat between us in Preston's conference room, and Preston opened the meeting the way he opens everything, dry and careful, laying the original trust document, Dad's navy blue binder, the one he'd assembled himself with labeled tabs, The physical thing I'd grown up watching him update at the kitchen table, flat on the table between us like a Bible. I didn't raise my voice once. I laid out the billing office statement first, then the claims printout, then Nora's license search. I watched my sister's face go through 4 distinct kinds of pale. When I set down the document examiner's report on the letterhead, Dean actually reached for Brianna's arm and she shook him off, hard, and said, "This is insane. This is my grief. How dare you?" And I said, as evenly as I could manage, "Then tell me the name of a nurse who was in the room." She couldn't. Nobody can invent a detail like that on the spot, not one that survives a follow-up question, because a real memory has weight and a lie only has the shape of one. I played Ruth's recording last. 91 seconds. Preston stopped it halfway through and didn't ask me to finish it, because he didn't need to, and because my mother had already put both hands over her mouth. The legal and financial fallout moved faster than the emotional kind, which I think surprises people. Idaho's insurance fraud statute covers claims filed with intent to deceive an insurer for payment. And while Brianna hadn't successfully collected from Sawtooth Mutual directly, the forged clinic documentation submitted in support of a formal trust hardship petition was, per Preston and the outside counsel he brought in for the trust itself, unambiguous attempted fraud against a fiduciary instrument. And my father, tinker to the last, had written a forfeiture clause into the trust that neither of us had ever had reason to read closely. Any beneficiary found to have submitted fraudulent documentation in support of a distribution forfeits their entire remaining interest in the corpus to the other beneficiary, not a penalty, not a delay. Forfeiture, full stop, in Walter Kowalski's own handwriting on the margin of a typed page, a note Preston said Dad added the week before he died, half joking, half not, saying just in case one of them decides to be cute. Brianna was never criminally charged. The Ada County Prosecutor's Office reviewed the file. Preston insisted on referring it, both to protect the trust's other assets, and, I think, to make sure I never spent the rest of my life wondering if I should have. And declined to pursue charges, citing the absence of a completed insurance payout and Brianna's cooperation once confronted. But the county did require her to sign a formal restitution agreement covering the trust's legal costs in the matter, about $11,000, paid in installments she's still making. Dean left her 4 months later. I don't know all of what happened in that marriage, and I've stopped trying to guess. My mother did not speak to Brianna for the better part of a year, which was its own kind of grief I hadn't anticipated. Watching my mother lose a daughter to a lie instead of a death. Aunt Ruth and I are closer now than we were before any of this happened. In the specific way that shared, ugly knowledge sometimes binds 2 people together, whether they wanted it to or not. She still watches the dog on the rare occasions Brianna needs her to, a D-Day tent none of us have fully examined out loud. And she still has that same monitor app on her phone, though she's told me more than once, half laughing, half not, that she's never once opened it again on purpose. I asked her once, months after the trust meeting, why she'd hit record that night, instead of just quietly forgetting what she'd overheard. The way most people probably would have. And she told me it was because she'd spent 71 years watching people in this family choose peace over truth. Her own siblings included, and she'd decided somewhere in her 60s that she was done being one more person who looked away, because looking away was easier. I think about that answer more than almost anything else that came out of that whole year. It's the closest thing to a lesson I've taken from any of it. The corpus, once Brianna's interest formally forfeited, didn't come to me all at once. Preston restructured the trust's distribution schedule so that the North End units and the cabin at Payette Lake now vest to me alone at 18 months from now. I kept paying the family Sawtooth Mutual premium on Brianna's coverage anyway, out of my own pocket, for exactly 1 more year. Because whatever she did, I couldn't make myself be the reason she went without insurance in the meantime. Preston told me that was more generous than the trust required. I told him it wasn't about the trust. My mother eventually did speak to Brianna again, almost 14 months after the meeting in Preston's office, a slow, careful reconciliation that started with short phone calls and has not, as far as I know, ever fully returned to what it was before. I wasn't part of rebuilding that particular bridge and didn't try to be. Some things in a family break clean enough that everyone can eventually stand on the same side of them again. And some things break in a way that just means you learn to build two separate rooms in the same house, close enough to hear each other, careful about which doors stay open. I don't know yet which kind this is going to be, between me and my sister. I know it isn't the first kind. I'm still finding out whether it can be the second. I still have the fake ultrasound. Preston gave it back to me after the county closed its file. Since I was the one who'd assembled the evidence, and technically the trust's copy, I didn't throw it away, though I thought about it for a long time, standing over the kitchen trash can on Alcher's Street with it in my hand. Instead, I clipped it into the back pocket of Dad's navy binder, behind the tab marked Amendments, where anyone who opens that book to understand what our family actually is will eventually find it, not as a trophy. As a rule, the same way Dad meant the whole binder to be rules, instead of just leaving us alone with each other. A reminder, printed in cheap inkjet ink, that's already starting to fade, of exactly how close we came to losing everything real over something that was never there at all. And that's the story of a locket with the wrong timestamp, a doctor who never existed, and the recording of Brianna's own voice saying, "Doesn't have to be real. It just has to be documented." The proof that turned a grieving sister's hardship petition into a forfeited inheritance. Now I want to know what you would have done if you caught a mismatched date on a photo your sister wore around her neck as proof of her own grief. Would you have let it go? Or could you have spent months quietly verifying it the way Jo did, at the risk of being wrong about someone you loved? Tell me in the comments. If this story kept you hooked, share it with someone who'd love a good betrayal story like this one. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this channel is all about stories like Jo's. Family money, difficult choices, and the moments that quietly change everything. There's another story coming soon. Until then, trust the paperwork when the story doesn't quite add up, and I'll see you in the next story.